I'm up at Anstey's on the Trek. Now, I just dropped a review on this thing, long-term review, and I just want to clear up my opinions on this are obviously very critical. My opinions on everything are as objective as I can be. Now, it's just relative. When I say that it's not my bag of chips, this suspension platform, it's relative to what I've ridden and the performance I've gained from other bikes I've tested, being that I've tested so many bikes. And also, it's a little bit of a caveat with what I've tested previously, because as I go on, my understanding of finding a good setup on suspension continually evolves. And there's bikes that I've tested in the past that, with knowledge I have now, I could go back, retest the bike, and potentially come up with not a different result, but a more comprehensive understanding of how it works, and maybe potentially with some bikes a better end setup. But at the time of every review, I'm restricted by the confines of my current information and also ability to swap shocks and what I have at hand. So keep that in mind. This thing does slay, but it's, in order to get the perfect position for compliance, it's, let's say this is efficiency up this end and this is compliance up this end. To be in the center of what I would classify the balance of efficiency and compliance for this bike is not as efficient as the balance of efficiency and compliance on a bike with, say, a 20% suspension progression. Depending again on all the other factors of the bike, where they've built the BB height, all of those other things. So it's such a complex topic, but in a vacuum, this thing does, in isolation of everything else, this thing does slay. It absolutely slays. Now, I'm going to do a run here. I've just gotten word that the standard shock has been replaced. So I've got the Bomber CR. This has been fixed, and it's been reliable since it's been fixed. So I've had two Bombers, they've both blown up. This one's been reliable since it's been fixed. It's been fixed with older parts, so more robust parts from the older Fox van. It's basically a Fox van with different markings. So that's been reliable so far. So we'll see how that goes long term. But the new shock, so I'll take this off and I'll put the air shock back on, because that was damaged. That got damaged pretty early, and I sent it to SRAM. They sent it back to me. I sent it back to them. And now they've replaced it. So they've recognized this time around that there's an issue there. I'm not sure what the damage is. I'll do a little video of that later. But I'll put it back on and I'll retest it, and I'll do like a back-to-back of how this bike performs with the coil set up well at optimal and the air shock set up at optimal. The air shock gives me a little bit more tuning variability than the coil, being that I can partially manipulate the air spring. But for this bike, I'd want to manipulate it backwards, so I wouldn't want to add tokens, I'd want to take tokens out. The positive chamber is already empty in that Trek specific rear shock, but you can get negative spaces for it. So the answer to get that, essentially get that positive chamber bigger to make it less progressive, I would go a negative spacer to make the negative chamber smaller, which brings the ratio of the negative to positive down, which makes it makes the positive chamber large relative to the negative chamber. So I will then not need to take spaces out, imaginary spaces out of the positive chamber, because I've just shrunk the whole ratio. So, and that may leave me space to put a spacer in the positive. Not that I can either anyway, because they use proprietary spacers for the Trek specific shock rather than the standard RockShox Deluxe and Super Deluxe spacers. So bit of a complex blowout and rant there, but let's drop this and just give you an idea. And people were saying my fork's probably a bit stiff, purely because of the pressure number that I stated, which is 100 psi. I got it at 99 today, no token, which is pretty well spot on. Anstey's Hill, wild side. See how she goes. Now the efficiency compliance. So right now I have compliance, but I can't really get off the line very fast. So I should have put Strava on really. Thinking, whoo, a little bit too inside on that sandy turn. No matter. out for the rock there. I'm actually starting to think that I should wear shin guards, because the amount of rock strikes I've had spit up onto my shins is just getting ridiculous. A little bit offline there, not too bad. So super smooth, quite compliant for the most part in the back. Handling's good. The pedaling platform's good. Oh, that was a poor line. So not a lot of speed through here, but certainly capable, and a good position ride wise, so can corner well, can change directions well, not clipping pedals, so right on the low end of acceptable ride height. Nice fresh corner there. The guys have been working hard out here, that's for sure. Another freshie, runs well. Pretty smooth through that choppy bit. And smooth over that, which is generally janky. So I'm not saying the bike's not smooth. It's certainly a supple performer, but it's to get it to where it's a supple performer, it's not efficient, because you have to start too deep in the sag at 34%, 33%, probably 34%, maybe even 35%. And it just doesn't have that efficiency that I like. So don't be disheartened if you've got one. It's just, I'm a very picky person. I try and be as objective as I can, and from my testing, I've found that they could improve it by buttoning off the progression a little bit. Now, how that pertains to heavier people, to be honest, I'm not 100% sure, but I've set a couple of heavier guys' bikes up and had similar results with similar setups on certain bikes that I've set up for lighter setups as well. So maybe there's merit to a heavier guy needs more of a ramp on the spring, but I think it's still, you have to have appropriate ramp for it to follow your exponential increase in weight as the bike compresses, which maybe that increases as you get heavier, maybe it doesn't. I'm not too sure, but my early preliminary thoughts are I don't think it makes too much of a difference. I think you just need an appropriate curve and then adequate pressure in order to support you. I may be completely wrong on that, so we'll see, time will tell. I'll tune more guys and see if I can get a couple of heavier guys under me and get them set up and see what I learn from that.